Before we begin, please be aware that this episode includes conversations around mature and potentially distressing topics, including trauma, abuse, human trafficking, child exploitation, violence, hostage situations, and suicide. Some of these discussions may be graphic or difficult to hear. Please take care of yourself. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Between the Now and the Next podcast. I'm your host, Heather Justice. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Eric Robinson, a former pastor turned FBI agent, with a story that is as compelling as it is unexpected. Eric spent 12 years in Christian ministry before stepping away from the Baptist pulpit in 2002 to join the FBI, where he served for the next 24 years. During his time in federal service, he encountered some truly remarkable and often intense experiences that ultimately led him to write his book titled Irreverend: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners with the FBI, which recounts what he witnessed throughout his career. In this conversation, we will explore the intersection of faith, calling, and the unexpected turns that life can take. We will talk to Eric about the time between him making the move from pastor to special agent with the FBI and his struggle to make the decision to change career paths. Eric brings a unique perspective, offering insight into what it means to walk through radically different seasons while holding on to purpose. This episode will keep you on the edge of your seat, so lock in and listen to my conversation with Eric Robinson. Eric, hi. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you.
Hi, Heather, and I appreciate being on your show.
Yeah. So your book is just incredible. I got to read the copy that you sent over, and your writing is so engaging, and I love it. And I can't wait for this to be released, which you said later this year it'll be released. People are going to just eat this up when it comes out. I'm excited for the audience to get to read it later this year.
I appreciate your review. I was glad to write it, and I thought, oh, these are the fun stories that we always sit around and tell. I think people want to hear these. And as I write it, I think that was great. I love that story. And then I hoped it would engage other people too. For me, I never lost the fascination of, man, I'm in the FBI. This is pretty cool.
Right?
And I would think other people would go, I bet it's cool in the FBI. I'm like, yeah, let me tell you about it.
Yeah, for sure. I actually interviewed and made it through the first round of interviews for an FBI agent. I wanted to go through and be a forensic accountant. So I wanted to do like the Bernie Madoff stuff, but I didn't make it any further than that. And it's probably a good thing because I started thinking about it and I'm like, I don't know how conducive that would be for a family someday or whatever, because if you get called in the middle of the night and you have to go raid something. But did you have any experience with that?
Actually, my former supervisor just called me this morning and we were chatting, and I told him, look, Rich, I know you think you know what it's like to give up your bureau phone, but you really don't know, because I had that with me all of the time. It was by my bed. If I was mowing the lawn, I would pull it out and check it every 10 minutes to make sure I didn't miss a SWAT call out or something important. I was in a store and I heard the old ringtone that I had for my bureau phone, which was an Eric Church song.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately start grabbing from my pocket and realize, oh, okay, I don't have to do that anymore. I'm not being whisked away somewhere in the middle of the day or night.
Yeah. Wow. I can only imagine. I'm already a hypervigilant person. I don't know how I would have done with that.
It's a specific form of PTSD of having to hear these sounds and react and now still deal with it, but I'm sure I will recover.
Yes. Now, how long have you been retired?
Just 2 months. So it's still affecting me. It's still on me.
Yeah, for sure. So first, I want to talk about what your life was like during the 12 years in ministry that you did and what initially drew you to the pulpit to be a pastor.
I was raised in a church. I grew up Lutheran. We went to church every week. It wasn't a high pressure thing. That's just what we did, and I enjoyed it. And I had a precocious knowledge of the Bible, read it plenty, knew the stories, and then in college started to actually get into developing my faith and beliefs and studying much more. So at that point, I thought, well, I've got to good understanding of scripture. I understand the importance of outreach to people and made that decision. Well, I should get into ministry. So my wife and I initially had a purpose of going overseas to be missionaries to Muslim countries. And then some circumstances with family made that less than wise decision. So we remained stateside. And then I went through that usual path of youth pastor, associate pastor, and then the church in Western New York, where I was the associate pastor, said, well, we'd like to plant a church off of ours in the neighboring town. And I said, I'd love to do that. And so had a core group of Christians, and we started a church in Jamestown, New York, that was meant to be a place to reach out to those who did not attend church or maybe not feel comfortable in a church. And we were very successful in creating an atmosphere that was very non-judgmental. And I emphasize to the people in the church, if we're going to make a mistake, we're going to err on the side of grace. So if God's going to judge us, let him judge us for being too loving and kind, and we'll deal with that later. And people came to the church and lives are being changed and we were growing. And I thought, this is great. This is the way church should be.
Yeah. You often hear that church is more of a hospital for sick people. What do you think about that?
It should be. Nobody wants to go to a hospital, but it should be a
No.
place where people feel welcomed and see something that they want to embrace. My favorite parable from the Bible is when Jesus says the kingdom of God is like a treasure, invaluable, hidden in a field, and a man finds it, sells everything he has so that he can buy the field. Because that's what we're asking people to do. We're not just saying, hey, pray this prayer and now you can get saved. You're asking people to completely change their lives, to give up everything that they knew before to embrace this. That's a big ask. And so I'm not going to just preach a sermon and at the end say, hey, if you pray this prayer, here you go, your life's changed. You've got to know before you sell everything you have what you're buying into. And that takes an audience. That takes people understanding what this is about. Otherwise, you have almost like a false start of people saying, yeah, I'd love to do that. And then suddenly it doesn't catch. And without getting into the theology of it, you have people who walk away then.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because I've heard many times from people that have, accepted Christ and they're like, man, things got harder. Things got harder when I became a Christian. I thought they'd get easier. And it's like, well, no, I mean, the word tells us that it's going to be a hard road. It's not just give your life to God and then you're going to live in rainbows and butterflies and unicorns all the time.
Right. And you've given up all your sins and
Yeah.
foibles and problems. Now it's easier. The difficult thing for me was drawing all those people in who hadn't grown up in church. They were bringing a lot of their personal issues with them.
Uh-huh.
And then I became burdened with those as well, unable to find the means of just hearing those things and then letting them go. And so because of that, I suffered from stress-related headaches every single day for 2 years without fail. Even though I was doing church the way I thought it should be done and we were successful and, hey, this is how it's working, my body said, yeah, we're not going to be able to do this for much longer. And I had to
Yeah.
find something else to do.
Yeah. So you were like, why not? Go be an
Why
FBI
not?
agent. I mean, sure,
I get asked by people like, why the FBI? And I go, because it's cool.
Yeah.
I asked a buddy who's still in, I go, people keep asking me that. And he just replied, because it's cool. I said, yes, that's the reason.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. How did you make the shift? Like what brought that on?
Well, this was baby years of the internet. So I didn't fill out a form online. I had to do it all by paper and just went through
Yeah.
that process. You go through the beginning stage and you say, hey, I think I can be an agent. And the applicant coordinator looks at it and goes, yeah, okay, next step. And you take this test, which is like an SAT test. And I remember taking it and going, well, that was worth a shot. There's no way I passed that. And then they say, yeah, you passed. And I thought, oh, wow. And then you move on to the written and interview. And at that point, I thought, okay, now I've got some control over this. I can interview well. I can do, writing well. And the fitness test, I'd been running for a long time. I was in shape.
Mm-hmm.
So from that point, okay, now I get in. And then you take somebody who's never handled a gun and you put them in FBI training and slowly got better and better until, years later became much more proficient.
Yeah. Wow. So you just said, I've got to leave ministry. the FBI sounds cool.
I applied for 2 jobs, one I was overqualified for and one I was underqualified for,
Huh?
and that was 24 years ago. The one that I was overqualified for, they turned me down. I thought, "Are you kidding me?" And then the FBI came back and said, "Yeah, sure. Let's try this." And I thought, "Okay, I guess that works." And the day that I was accepted into the FBI, my headache stopped. And so that was a pretty good cue
Wow.
that, okay, that was the right choice.
Wow. That's interesting. Because, I mean, that's a pretty high pressure job.
When I speak to people who are familiar with churches, they usually understand a bit more. It is high pressure, but it's a different stress. I didn't
Sure.
care if bad guys got away. I cared, but it didn't eat at me like somebody saying, "Hey, my child, is turning into a drug addict and is stealing from us." Like that
Mm,
matters, and it matters tomorrow.
yeah.
If if we hit a house and the guy becomes a fugitive, okay,
Hmm.
he'll get caught someday or society will find a way to bring justice. It
Sure.
didn't it didn't matter. It didn't matter like the people in my church mattered. So
Yeah.
I might be in a high stress situation and then my body would give me the adrenaline to do what I needed to do and then I was done and we moved on and
Hmm.
next task.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good point. It's a different kind of stress. Yeah.
And I think you'd understand this too. I say this jokingly, but it is true. There's also working with bad guys. If they act like criminals, that's how they act. I
Hmm.
expect that. When you work in the church and somebody acts in a way that's not Christian, it's much more disappointing. And
Sure.
so I've said many times, I'll likely spend eternity in heaven with some of the people I can't stand the most because I have
Yep.
no reason to doubt their salvation, but
Sure.
man, were they terrible to me.
Sure. Yeah. I have plenty that
You
I
have
can
name
think
you have
of for
names you have
myself.
names going right now,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
For sure. What's really sad too is that people, pastors in the last couple of years, I mean, how often have we seen these big megachurch pastors in the fall that they've taken and you find out, oh, they've been having affairs and they've been abusing their wives or spiritually abusing people in their congregation. All these crazy stories that we hear and they hide behind this mask of Christianity or spirituality or religion. And it's really sad. It's really sad when we see stuff like that. And I mean, I understand we're human and we all fall from grace and thank goodness for God's grace. But also, when people do that, it's very damaging.
It is. And that's large scale. And then there's just the individuals who hurt you. They
Yeah,
didn't tear down a church. They just were
right.
backstabbing Heather or they were
Yeah,
talking poorly about me. And part of that
yeah,
is the difficulty of working in a church. That's the
yeah.
stress.
Yeah, and you even mentioned that in your book about you saw just the myriad of lies that were thrown around in the church to cover up abuse at different times. And it's sad, but we are human and our flesh does make bad decisions. In between that time of the transition from being a pastor to moving to the FBI, I'm sure there was a tension between there sometimes like, ugh, am I doing the right thing? I think I am. And you mentioned your headaches went away like the day you started with the FBI. But where did you find God in the middle of that tension and in the middle of that transition?
Well, joining the FBI was getting a fire hose of understanding just what this 100-year-old complex agency was about. So there was a lot to that. Here I am, in some ways, an expert in the Bible, and now I'm a novice at law enforcement and having to
Yeah.
learn this on the way. It was early on where I felt that this is a comfortable fit for me. You mentioned these evil pastors wearing a mask. Well, I wasn't even being evil, but I felt like I had to wear a mask because I had to be perfect. But here we are in law enforcement, and I could just be someone who does my best, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I didn't have to be holy. I didn't have to be right. I didn't have to worry about somebody catching me at the liquor store from church or something like that.
Right.
Just hey, we're all normal here.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was doing God's work in the church, and I found it easy to believe that I was doing God's work in law enforcement as well because
Mm.
I'm helping to bring justice for people, and I know that that's important to God. So this is a role that I'm playing to bring people wholeness along the way.
Yeah. That's so good. Obviously, you just said about bringing justice. So you did feel a great sense of purpose then with your work that you did in the FBI.
I did, and I've told my kids this, and I told kids in the youth group this. If you can have a job or a career where you earn money for your family,
Hmm.
then you're doing something noble.
Yeah.
If you're fortunate enough to also have a paying job that brings something beneficial to society, I was fortunate to be doubly noble at two different jobs, with the church and then
Hmm.
with the FBI. And it was an honor to make a good living, but then also bringing good to people too.
That's so true. So, when you moved into being an FBI agent, did that change your understanding of God, or did it shift your understanding of God and faith in any way?
No, it opened my eyes to how people can be.
Yeah.
I was dealing with people in the church who had problems, and then in the criminal world, I was dealing with people who had problems and then indulged them and
Mm,
just abandoned everything. So, like, here's somebody coming to me in a church saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. I've done something wrong and I need to change." Now, here's criminal people who are like, "Yep, and here we go," right down the path. So
yeah.
it didn't change how I saw God. In some ways, it brought me out of that shell of being just in church and saying, "Oh, I've got this down. I know what's right and wrong because I can read the Bible," to being in a place where my eyes are open up a bit that maybe not everything is so linear. Maybe there's more aspects to humanity here.
That's a good point. Were there times when you found your faith to be challenged?
No, whenever we were doing our operations, carrying out procedures, everything was being checked off by judges, by administration. And so I
Mhm,
felt like we were doing what was right. The
mhm.
one time, and I wouldn't say my faith was challenged, but there was a bit of a confrontation, was the time that I was having to arrest a pastor from a trio of pastors who had been sex trafficking a teenage girl. And so here I am, a former minister years out,
Mhm.
now trying to bring a literal come to Jesus sermon to this pastor who did not want to bring Jesus into the conversation because that was a different man who followed Jesus. And the one that we were talking about today was just a sinful man, a guy who wasn't the same who was in the pulpit.
Wow. I actually sit on the board for an anti-sex trafficking ministry here in my town called Anu. So that's something that's very, very close to my heart because it's so eye-opening when I got educated about sex trafficking and how it literally happens in your own city, like right under your nose. And the fact that there's people that aren't even aware of what sex trafficking is and that it happens in your own community is scary.
And I worked crimes against children for a few years in Toledo, Ohio. And one of the simplest things that people mistake is the idea of trafficking, that I am taking you somewhere. Whereas you could be a wife who is sex trafficked and you never leave the home if you
Right.
have a controlling partner. And many of these girls, they were already the ones that we were trying to reach out to, rescue, get away from the influence of the pimps. Many of them were doing this on their own in the first place.
Mhm.
So you're a 15, 16-year-old girl, you're on the street, so you are making that
Yeah.
choice to have sex with other men. And here comes a pimp who says, "Great, I can help you out," and gets involved. And that's why so many of the pimps were dumbfounded, because they didn't do anything. I mean,
Mhm.
she was already tricking. That's how he met her. I'm not forcing her to do this. She's doing this, been doing it for years. And that was their mindset. Like, I didn't traffic her. I just helped her and benefited. And of course, they don't understand the terms of trafficking either.
Right. Right. Wow, I never thought of it from that perspective. That's eye-opening.
Well, many of the pimps would fight their cases in court or up to that end because they honestly thought they did nothing wrong. Because in some ways they were helping the girl, they're keeping them safe, promoting them. The girl is making more money than before. The biggest issue here is, if you and I met a 15-year-old girl who was prostituting, we would do something completely opposite in helping her, rather than saying, "Look, let's benefit on this. You having
Right.
sex. Let's go."
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. What were some of, obviously without sharing too much or anything confidential, but what were some of the most impactful or eye-opening experiences that you had during your time with the FBI?
I remember on one occasion, and it was leading up to Easter, my partner Laura and I and Task Force Officer Pete, the team, we were trying to rescue a 15-year-old girl who had been prostituting and then was under the control of a pimp, 20-some-year-old man. And we were step by step trying to recover her, find her, set up a sting so that we could get her.
Mhm.
And she was, for a time, being assisted by another woman. So this woman was early 20s and she was prostituting, and then she was helping this teenage girl. That's actually the definition legally of sex trafficking. If you are helping someone to do this or benefiting from it. And so in order to find the young girl, we had a sting on the woman, and rather than using this to charge her, we always had that in our pocket, but we used that sting, that arrest, to elicit her assistance to find the girl who had since then been moved on to Chicago. Because now we had arrested her and we've gotten past that cop subject stage, we were sitting down and I was engaged in small talk. She maybe was 100 pounds, bought her lunch as we sat down and kind of sat on the bumper of my vehicle. And as we made small talk, she said to me, my dad has molested me since I was a child. Do you think that's why I do what I do?
Wow.
And that was a very honest statement, question that just came out. And I think part of that was because I didn't come at her and say, you're disgusting, you're what's wrong with our society.
Mhm.
I just came to her and say, look, we need your help. I'm going to treat you like a human being. How about I buy you lunch and let's talk about this. Let's get you out of these handcuffs. That opened her up to say, okay, I'm going to start trusting these people, and then even kind of analyzing what her life has come to.
Yeah. In that situation specifically, I'm sure many of the things you learned in your time in ministry, just how to talk to people and how to engage with them, show them grace and treat them like a human being. And I'm sure that helped and came into play a little bit.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Some of it is what I had learned and tools in ministry, and some of it is just that's who I am. I think
Yeah.
it works well, but I never regretted being open and
Hmm.
curious of people, listening to them in in ministry. If you come to me and say, "Hey, I've had this problem, I've got this issue in my marriage," if I just go to the Bible and quote some verses to you, you're going to walk away thinking, "Okay, that guy didn't listen." Why
Right.
would I go back to him?
Sure.
And if I would go to victims or criminals or witnesses and just say, I've got the facts, here's what it is, I don't need to listen to you, then I'm not learning what they've been through, what their side is. And that also
Hmm.
shuts them down too.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So, did you find at all that career in the FBI affected you personally with your mental health or your relationships or just like your view of people in general?
Well, a bit with my view of people, when I was in the academy, one of our instructors said, guys, you need to be careful. Law enforcement's hard on family. I'm on my fifth marriage already. And I thought, nah, I think that's probably you. And, and there were many nights I had to be gone. There were long days, there were weekends, but I always was present otherwise. If I'm not staying out, going to the bars late, or just hanging around with guys, or seeking out deleterious ways to handle my stress, then if I had to be gone at some point, then my family understood.
Yeah.
Look, dad's got to be out. He's got a wire shift, listen to phone taps late, or has to be on surveillance, has to go away for this SWAT operation. But then I'm available and present the rest of the time. Then I think the family saw that, okay, this is excusable. The issue that did come up, though, is just having to be self aware that when you check in each day and log in the computer and start going through phone records or something, every day you are looking at some of the worst people in the world.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of this and remind yourself that I'm purposely looking for bad people. So
Yeah.
not everyone is like this. Don't be cynical.
Mm,
Don't think that the world is absolutely so dark.
yeah. That's a good point. Because if that's what you're surrounded with and that's your job and that's what you're in all the time, then I could see that. It could be very easy to have that cynical view, and everybody you look at like, hmm, what do I not know about you? Let's see. Can I trust you? Are you manipulating me in some way? Or,
Well, and it's not even just the criminals, but like we would be on wiretaps listening to phones, and you'd hear one drug dealer talking to a guy who owned a restaurant and says, "Hey, I need to store some of my stuff at your place." And he's like, "Yeah, no problem." So this is a guy who's not even a criminal. He'll never
right.
get charged, but he's supporting it. And then, here's a guy who's earning $500 to just drive a vehicle, don't ask any questions, and he knows there's something wrong,
Yeah.
and he'll never get charged either. So you get open to, there are criminals, and then there's those who just accept criminality in the world as well.
Yeah. I'll never forget. In my old place I used to live, I would come home for lunch every day. I lived close by. And I came home one afternoon and there's just like FBI SWAT surrounding my condo building. And I'm like, I just want to go have lunch. Can I go? Can I come through here? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. And so I go into my condo and all of a sudden I hear them coming over with like megaphone or something. You need to come out of your house, and telling this person to get out of their house, and they're trying to draw them out. It was wild. And so I find out that FBI agents, had been sitting in unmarked cars in my neighborhood for like months and months and months beforehand, and staking out and watching a specific unit. And he was a drug distributor. So they had been keeping an eye out and watching him. The thing is, I knew this guy. I mean, I didn't like hang out with him or whatever, but I knew him. He was my neighbor. He lived 3 units down from me. He knew my dogs. He would be like, how's Zoe? He would always say hi to me. Seemed like the nicest dude. Just real cool, real chill.
There are two types of criminals. There's the guys who break the law, and so they'll go to prison and they're fine. And then there's the guys who break the law and they're horrible human beings too. We had a high-level drug dealer in Chicago that my buddy had a case on, and I remember we would sit down for what's called proffer interviews.
Mhm.
You say, I'm going to admit what I did wrong and I'm going to get credit for it. And we go, great. Now you got to sit down and you'll get extra credit if you tell us everything about all criminal activity.
Yeah.
And it's like called Queen for a Day. Like, here you are, you're the center of attention, but you got to tell us everything, and then
Yeah.
you get a good benefit. And we'd walk away from that, and I tell my buddy, I say, like, is it me, or like, would you be okay living next door to this guy? He was nice, very polite. He was going to go to prison for years, but nice guy. And then we have
Yeah.
others who you listen to their jail calls or phone tap, and they're mean to their kids and they're terrible to their wives and they're just despicable. So yeah, you just happen to get one of the nice ones. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness. That's just crazy thinking about that. Like we talked about, there's women being trafficked all around us, but then there's criminals that seem really super duper nice and you would just never know. There was also somebody I used to work with, ended up finding out that he was involved with CSAM. For those who don't know what that is, it's child pornography and things. But yeah, he was involved with that stuff. This guy, I always thought something was kind of odd about him. He just seemed there was something I just couldn't put my finger on about him. But I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe he was bullied as a kid or something. I don't know, but he's strange. And then this happened years later and he got arrested for that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's wild, crazy. And then where I live now, 5 doors down from me, there was another guy who was involved with stuff like that. And again, FBI, SWAT team, all that, they were there and did the raid, and just crazy.
Yeah. Well, and your instinct may have been right about that man having been bullied as a child, but probably not bullied, because likely he was harmed or abused, assaulted sexually at a young age, and now he is stunted in that attraction, and that's what he comes back to. And
Yeah.
many of the pedophiles that we would arrest, I didn't have to tell them that they're horrible because they already knew that. They hated themselves. They were fully ashamed of what they did. Most were like this. Most are ready to just open right up and admit it because they knew this day would come. And then the other option to that is why you say there's a SWAT team coming, is they know what's coming. And so many will become violent about it, either shooting at law enforcement or killing themselves, which is still dangerous when you're introducing a weapon. So that's why
Yeah.
oftentimes now with these child predators, we have SWAT teams for the arrest.
Yeah. I've heard that they put them in the same part of the prison with the murderers, which is wild.
Yeah, seems like they're almost chumming for sharks.
Right. It's the world we live in, unfortunately. You kind of mentioned this at the beginning when we were talking about what made you decide that it was time to write your book. Can you elaborate on that a little more? I mean, I know you said you guys would like sit around and share stories and you're like, other people might want to hear this too, but
Right. Well,
yeah.
and that's exactly it, that agents have stories, and whenever
Mhm.
there's a downtime, people will start telling stories, and I would hear the stories and like, "Oh, yeah, I've heard that one before," but then also I think, "That's actually pretty remarkable," and the things that we're part of, and it's not every day, but every agent who's been in for any time could marvel you, and that was just like a regular arrest, and you could be sitting on the edge going, and then what happened? When I was getting near retirement, my wife says, you should write a book, and I said, yeah, sure, but I didn't write down all those stories, and I wish I had. But once I made my attempt sitting at the computer, all those stories,
Yeah.
and then you go, oh, tell me another one. Let me tell you this one. There's this
Yeah.
time where we arrested 2 mass shooters back to back in a weekend, and the biggest cases our squad's ever had. And then I could tell you the stories of porting every window in the house with glass broken everywhere. And the one kid slept with a shotgun next to his bed. So, this is definitely a SWAT hit, and all these details. And then we have the silly things that go along with it too. My buddy, who was a Toledo police cop, was interviewing one of the subjects, and at the end, here's 20 guys from a SWAT team with rifles busting out windows, and at the end, one of the subjects goes, "Okay, well, I appreciate you talking with me. Do you have a business card or something in case I have questions?" And he goes, "Well, you're going to be arrested now." He put her at such ease, like, we just destroyed your rental property. And you're like, "Oh, okay, well, thanks for talking." And, take
Oh
him
my
away.
God.
But the craziest thing with that is she had a kitten that we were taking care of while we're doing the search of the house. And we're like, well, we're going to handcuff you now. Do you have any piercings or anything? She goes, oh, yeah, I have 2 nipple piercings. And we go, okay, well, we'll turn around. And so she puts them down on the table where we've been sitting. And the kitten jumps up and just starts batting these piercings around the table. And it's just funny, silly things like that go on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's funny because you're in the middle of this high, intense pressure situation, and then you can't help but laugh at something like that.
Right. Well, this went from an investigation where they provided black powder for pipe bombs. They had all the materials going. We had a surreptitious search warrant, which basically means we can break into your house and not tell you about it and
Wow.
hide everything. We go through. They were ready to shoot up people. One of the subjects says, "Yeah, we probably would have done it." The SWAT team hitting them and all this violence, and then we end with a silly thing with a kitten playing with piercings. So it's all of it all together.
Wow. Yeah, that's funny. What is your hope that readers will take away after they finish reading your book?
I liken my life to a crazy social scientist says, I want to do an experiment. I want to take a Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun before, and I'm going to put him in the FBI. And everyone says, that's crazy. That'll never work. He goes, no, no, no. Hear me out. And people are going to see, oh, this is what it's like.
Mhm.
So I was a man who used to lead people in a church, and now I'm placed in a different role. And I think I come to my life in the FBI from a similar perspective that you would. That if
Mhm.
you hear about FBI stories, you go, wow, that's pretty amazing. And I go, yeah, I
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how I feel. I was just a person,
Mhm.
someone not from the military or law enforcement, and I got stuck in this prestigious, greatest law enforcement agency in the world. And I got to be a part of that and do some pretty remarkable things too. So I think people walk away going, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. What was your time at Quantico like when you went there to train?
At first, it's difficult. I spent 24 years in the FBI. I probably understand half of it. There's so many aspects that you'll never learn. So you're starting to learn that way. Also, our computer system was DOS based until 2012. So we're tabbing from one to the next. It's pretty good now, but I mean, just so backwards. But the training it was interesting because I got to meet so many unique people. There's some FBI support staff now becoming agents, military, of course. I got the nickname Preacher
Hmm.
because that was natural. And I let people know that when I was on the SWAT team, I knocked in the doors. So I went from Preacher to Breacher. Natural.
I love it.
And I kept in touch with many of my classmates. One of them became number 3 in the FBI. Everybody kind of figured it. Brian was an amazing leader, and he stayed single, so that kind of helps for moving up because you're going to go all over the place.
Hmm.
And he was on the first FBI fly team, which is a group of tactically trained agents that go overseas. They fly overseas and interview high value subjects, usually counterterrorism subjects who have been captured. So to be among those people and being satisfied with being Joe agent for myself that was my career.
That's pretty interesting. How do you discern when it's God leading you versus your own desire? I always struggle with this
Right.
personally. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a very tangible person. So I want somebody to look at me and tell me this is what you need to do. I want somebody to clearly tell me this is the route you need to go.
Well, I feel comfortable in saying that there is a wide berth in God's will, that if you're within God's general will, then the choices that you make are going to be acceptable. I have always had a difficult time in the church or out of the church with definitive statements of God wants me to do this. Because I can say God wants me to do this in a general sense. I've always been critical of people who will have a church outreach and somebody will say, I'm praying for 1,000 people to come. I'm like, okay, why not 1,500? Why not 1,000,000? I mean,
Yeah.
God can do anything he wants to,
Hmm.
and we're just set to do what he wants us to do within his will and try our best and honor him. So
Yeah.
I've just always felt comfortable to say, I'm going to do what I believe honors God. And if it's falling out of his specific will, then hopefully he's just going to redirect. He's big enough where I'm not going to screw up what he's got in mind.
It's true. That's so good because so often fear, right, can lead us into feeling like, what if I'm making this choice and it's not what God wants for me? Then I'm just not going to do it at all. I'm not going to take a step. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to live in wherever I am now because this feels comfortable. And I feel like sometimes when we do that, that can have us miss out on ways that God can use us.
Yeah. And without sounding too critical, I don't want to, but I think in many ways that's people using an excuse to know God's specific will. And it's just actually fear, as you
Hmm.
say. Like, I don't know if God wants me to do exactly this, so I'm going to stay put until then. Well, you need to move, you need to act. God's given us all sorts of abilities and desires, and the choice that you make, I may look at and go, I'd never do that, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means
Right.
I would never do that. And God's going to honor so many different things that you do. The
Sure.
charities that you pick to promote. Why are you promoting a dog shelter? Like, oh, okay, well, you really like dogs. That's fine. God likes dogs too.
Yeah. Those are his creation too.
Absolutely.
What would you tell someone, or what advice do you have for someone who feels like maybe they're being called into this completely unexpected direction, or they feel like they're in a season of unraveling or reinvention?
One of the difficulties I had was making that choice when I was in the ministry, that I put up with pain for too long. And it wasn't just stubbornness or fear. It was really thinking, but this is working. This is good. This is what I was meant to do.
Mhm.
And so if I could go back in time to talk to my younger self, first off, my younger self is like, you look really good for an old man. Like, and I'd say, thanks, appreciate it. But
Yes.
also, I would say humans are resilient. We adapt well. If I make a choice and that choice is wrong, you'll make it through it. And you'll be better because you'll have learned from that mistake. What
Mhm.
we choose may not be perfect and it may not be the right thing, but as you get older, you become braver. And I think that bravery comes from knowing this won't destroy me. My
Mm.
bad choices will work out. I'll overcome, I'll right the ship, I'll readjust, and I'll move to the next thing. So it brings people, I think, and it should, if you are examining yourself, it brings you to a place where you can take those chances because you realize whatever happens, if it's bad, I will overcome because I always overcome. Things that break you then heal and you move on to the next.
Yeah, that's really good. After everything that you've seen in your career, both in the ministry and in the FBI, what is it that still gives you hope?
So many times we would work cases and be frustrated by prosecutors who wouldn't want to charge people, or I would know that these people have broken the law and there's no justice there. What gives me hope is just knowing that there are always good people around looking to do what is right. So I get raised in the church understanding about original sin and how all humans are fallen. And yeah, we have that kernel in us. We're going to choose wrong many times. But I also see that many people choose what is right, and many people bounce back and adjust from their bad choices. So I think I can't recall which book I read it in, but the one thing that is truly the unforgivable sin in the Bible is stubbornness, the willingness to not change, to not turn from your sin. Because if I say I'm going to do what's wrong and I don't care what you or God says, I'm sticking to it, you can never be forgiven because you will always stay in that path.
Yeah.
And so seeing how people can turn around, can change, can make terrible mistakes or even have harmful things done to them, but then turn from that or come out of it, it brings me hope. I can be a huge screw up too. But as long as I don't stick to saying I've done nothing wrong and be recalcitrant about it, I can come back from that too.
Yeah. As long as we're willing to do that and repent and turn from our ways and try to be better, for sure. So I'm going to end with the question that I ask all of my guests. What is something that God is teaching you right now that you did not expect to be learning at this stage of your life?
Well, God has been teaching me this much and much more, to live without judgment. I've always been, not even in a condemning way, but being very judgmental of saying this is right and this is wrong, black and white. And God has opened up to me more and more to accept people for their circumstance, to think they're doing the best that they can and make that assumption. And with that, being curious has been a trait that I have been working on for a long time, so that when you tell me something that I disagree with, I don't then oppose it and give you my point of view, but I want to hear more about what you have to say. I want to hear where you're coming from. And that can be in the smallest things, that curiosity, lacking judgment, but just being open. I mean, that can even be when your children come to you and say, I can't do this. I can't learn how to play piano. And rather than you say, of course you can, honey, of course you can. If you're open to, tell me about that. Tell me why that is.
Yeah.
And then you're going to learn more. You can always be an encourager, but rather than defend, deny, or oppose what people have to say and stand in judgment, being curious and open to their point of view, I think is a great thing for me to continue learning.
That's so good.
Well, if you said otherwise, you'd be opposing me.
Hey, that's true. That's true. Maybe this is somewhere I need to grow, you know?
Absolutely.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time and for coming on. I just really enjoyed our conversation, and I've gotten to read the book, but I'm excited for everybody else that's going to get to read your book later this year. So, like I said, I will post this once your book comes out, so that way our listeners can be reminded of you and our conversation, and then they can go get your book.
Absolutely. I appreciate it very much, Heather.
Yes, thanks so much. In the words of Eric, the FBI is just plain cool. Eric's story was really a powerful reminder that purpose isn't always linear. And sometimes the most unexpected turns in our lives are the very places where God meets us in new and meaningful ways. So maybe you're in a season of transition right now and you're questioning what your next step is, or just trying to trust God in the unknown. And I really hope that you found value in this conversation, and maybe it gave you the courage to keep moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. One of the biggest takeaways for me was that I don't have to get it perfectly right to still be walking in purpose. God is big enough to guide me and redirect me and meet me wherever I am. In the show notes, you'll find the information to stay connected with Eric so that you can keep an eye out for his book, Irreverend: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners with the FBI. It's coming out later this year. and you're definitely going to want to read it. Did you know that I'm also an author? I wrote a 90-day devotional titled Healing on the Horizon. I've included a link in the show notes where you can purchase a copy of my book. Maybe you or someone you know needs this exact resource right now. If today's episode helped you in any way, will you share it with a friend or leave a review? Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss what's coming next. All of these actions really help podcasts like mine get out into the world and reach more listeners. Thanks again for listening and for showing up to hear my conversations with these amazing guests. Until next time, keep living between the now and the next.